Let's begin with something deceptively simple: purple. Not as a color swatch, not as an aesthetic preference, but as a clue. Purple looks obvious, immediate, real. Today, we explain the gap hiding inside that obviousness. The purple gap is the distance between the world as it physically exists and the world as a system must construct it in order to act, perceive, and mean. Quaternion Process Theory, QPT, gives us a language for that distance. Kappa, the physical domain; nu, the formal encoding; and omega, the qualitative operation that makes the world usable. The provocation is this: red has a physical address, i.e. a photoreceptor. Green has a physical address. Purple does not. There is no single wavelength of light that is detected by humans that is purple. And yet purple is one of the most vivid things we experience. That should bother us, in a productive way, because it means perception is not simply reception. The brain is not passively displaying the spectrum. It is constructing an experience where the physical domain leaves a hole. Purple is the first witness. Quality can be real without having a direct physical address. At the intellectual layer, the world is indifferent to our categories. The visible spectrum is continuous and linear, running from violet to red. It does not curve back around. Red and violet are not neighbors in physics. They are endpoints. So if we only describe the physical world, there is no circular color wheel, no smooth passage from red into violet through purple. That circle is not out there. It is something a perceptual system adds. Now, the biological system faces a brutal engineering problem. The physical spectrum is effectively infinite dimensional, but the retina does not get infinite channels. It gets 3 cone types: S, M, and L. Biology compresses kappa into nu. That compression is useful, efficient, transmissible, but it is also lossy. Once reality has been squeezed into 3 channels, the system no longer has direct access to the full physical source. It has a formal signal, and that signal is powerful but incomplete. This is where the map starts to exceed the territory. When long and short wavelength cone responses fire together without the middle channel participating in the expected way, the formal system can point to a coordinate that has no corresponding single wavelength. In QPT terms, nu has produced a valid internal configuration with no direct kappa referent. The map contains a place that the physical territory does not. A purely formal system has only a few choices when its map fails. It can flag an error, it can interpolate incorrectly, it can leave the space blank, or it can do something more profound: generate quality. Purple is not an error message. It is not a null value. It is not a statistical average. It is a qualitative construction, a new category of experience generated to make an otherwise incomplete encoding livable. This is the architecture QPT is really teaching. Kappa is the physical domain, continuous, causal, indifferent. Nu is the formal encoding, discrete, compressed, structured, and limited. Omega is the qualitative layer, the operation that senses what the formal system cannot fully determine and resolves it into experience. Purple is not just a color example, it is a clean demonstration of the kappa, nu, omega trajectory. Purple is not a wavelength, it is a bridge. More precisely, it is victim gap plus wandering sensing. The brain does not average red and blue and report some midpoint. It constructs a qualitative category that closes the open end of the spectrum. This is why purple matters. It shows that wandering does not merely decorate formal encoding, it compensates for its structural limits. It makes a finite system feel continuous. Now we widen the argument. Purple is one kind of omega operation, but not the only one. Purple is gap bridging. Brown is relational context. White is integration from complexity. Pink or magenta under ambient light can involve layered construction. The important move is that quality is not a single magic ingredient. It performs different structural jobs depending on the limitation in new. Sometimes it bridges, sometimes it contextualizes, sometimes it simplifies, sometimes it vivifies. Brown makes the argument even sharper. Take the same orange signal. Isolated, it reads as orange. Placed in the right relational environment, it becomes brown. The focal signal has not changed in the simple way we imagine. What changes is the system's judgment of that signal against its context. Brown is not just dark orange. Brown is omega reading a relationship that new can encode positionally, but cannot, by itself, turn into a qualitative world. This is not a passive pipeline. It is a loop. Light hits the world. The visual system transduces it, new compresses and processes it. Omega expands it into experience, and the organism acts. Then, action changes the sensory field, and the loop begins again. Color perception is a harness between physical reality and organism capability. It does not exist to copy the world perfectly. It exists to let the organism navigate the world meaningfully. The better the mediation works, the less we notice it. We do not experience the construction of purple. We experience purple. We do not see three-channel compression, cone adaptation, contextual correction, or the 1,000 micro-adjustments that make color stable. Successful mediation erases its own evidence. This is one of the central insights of the QPT. The most important intelligence in a system may be precisely the part that disappears when it works. Now, the frame scales. The point is not only that the brain invents purple. The point is that every mediated system faces its own purple gaps. Artificial intelligence also operates between reality and formal encoding. It receives tokens, pixels, vectors, labels, prompts, rankings. But the deeper question is whether it has any capacity equivalent to omega, the ability to sense when a formal gap requires a qualitative construction, rather than another formal manipulation. Current large language models are immensely capable systems. They transform formal tokens into formal tokens through learned statistical structure. That is not nothing. It is extraordinary. But in this framing, they do not possess native omega. They can detect patterns that look anomalous. They can produce continuations that statistically resemble insight. But they do not invent purple in the biological sense. They do not quality sense the gap. They pattern match around it. This is where biological and artificial systems diverge most clearly. When the biological visuomotor system reaches off-map territory, omega can generate a useful bridge. The system creates experience where the map is incomplete. When an LLM reaches off-map territory, it is often forced to interpolate against existing categories. Sometimes that works, sometimes it hallucinates, sometimes it fails silently. The difference is not capability in familiar territory. The difference is what happens at the edge of the map. Verification sounds like the solution, but this is a blind spot. If one new-only system judges another new-only system, the judgment remains trapped in new. The judging model can detect formal inconsistency, contradiction, bad structure, or deviation from convention. But if both systems lack omega, neither can directly detect quality failure. This is correlated omega absence. The actor and judge are blind in the same dimension. This is why aesthetic coherence, emotional authenticity, and creative vitality are so hard to evaluate formally. They are purple-like phenomena. You cannot reliably average them. You cannot fully reduce them to surface features. They live in the gap between what is formally present and what is qualitatively sensed. LLM as judge architectures will systematically underperform humans here, unless the system has some compensatory layer designed to approximate quality sensing. The trap in AI investment is that we pay for what we can see. Larger models, faster chips, bigger context windows, more compute. But the design frontier may be below the visible waterline. The highest leverage may sit in mediation, the invisible layer that helps a formal system stay connected to human meaning, context, and quality. If mediation works, it will not look dramatic. It will simply make the system feel less brittle, less alien, and more alive to the task. This is the thesis in one image. The crisp grid of new is necessary. Without formal encoding, there is no structure, no memory, no computation, no transmission. But the glowing void of omega is also necessary. Without quality sensing, the system can manipulate form while missing meaning. Intelligence requires both. Formal systems strong enough to operate, and mediation strong enough to recognize when formal structure has reached its limit. We end where we began. Purple. The next time you see it, notice the impossible thing happening. You are not simply receiving a wavelength. You are experiencing a percept with no direct physical address, generated because a formal system needed to cover its own limitation. That is beautiful, but it is also a warning. The central design question of the artificial age may be whether our systems can learn to recognize their own purple gaps, and whether we will build the mediation needed to help them cross those gaps responsibly.